Well, we've addressed this one already. We'll do it again now at greater length because it's getting a lot of you agitated. Pupils who fail GCSEs in maths and English will be banned, effectively, from taking student loans in an attempt, it's said, to restrict the numbers going to university and weed out pointless courses as a side effect of that. The Department for Education is set to publish proposals this week, I think tomorrow in fact, including limits on student numbers and a shake-up of higher education funding. Some argue that as this policy would only affect people with poor GCSEs from securing student loans, it will affect the poorest in society. Should you fail maths and English under this policy, you can still go to university, but you'd have to be self-funding, in other words, probably the bank of mum and dad. If they do implement this controversial policy, should everyone who does poorly in their GCSEs be blocked from going to university, which should be a kind of elite occupation? I mean, that's the old-fashioned sense of the word, that an academic elite. So for the debate this hour, we're asking, should universities accept people who fail their GCSEs? Joining me then, Rachel Hewitt from the Higher Education Policy Institute and Chris McGovern from the Campaign for Real Education. Thanks so much to both of you for joining us today. Rachel, you'll know that I'm sure you've seen it on Twitter. I see it in the inbox here. There are lots of people scratching their heads and astonished, actually, that you can go to university without a GCSE in maths or English.
Well, I think it's worth noting that it will only be a really limited number of people who will be affected by this change in policy. But for those who might be affected by it, it's worth thinking about what the impact might be and who those individuals might be. So, for example, if you're a mature student and you had a really tough time at school, you didn't get on well with school, but later in life you want to retrain, perhaps actually it would be a real issue to limit those people from accessing higher education and accessing opportunities. And the government have already, we expect them to acknowledge tomorrow that actually there'll need to be some restrictions on this in terms of people like mature students. So I think it's just whether this is the right mechanism to do so in the way in which it's done, whether limiting access to student loans is the right way to bring in this policy.
Chris McGovern, what do you make of this policy? I mean, the details we await, but the broad principles.
Well, let me say first of all that this grade 4 mathematics and English, which has been required, is itself a certificate of incompetence. It's a very low standard. When the BBC actually took cameras to South Korea a few years ago, they actually filmed South Koreans taking that GCSE mathematics, and they did it in about 20 minutes, and they sort of giggled politely and said, well, that's what we did in primary school. You have to remember, when you start to dumb down entry requirements going into university, you're also going to end up dumbing down degrees. The people who are going to be looking after us in the future, the engineers, the doctors, the nurses, the bankers, the lawyers, they're going to be not fit for the job because they're not going to be educated. Universities should be centres of excellence. That's not, by the way, in any way to disparage people who aren't academic, but we want horses for courses. A lot of young people are being persuaded to go to university, given incentives to go. They end up doing degrees which don't get them a job commensurate with that degree. They've been called by a Labour politician, Margaret Hodge, some years ago, Mickey Mouse degrees. So this is yet another betrayal. I would say we need to raise the bar, and a grade C mathematics, being a certificate of incompetence, is not high enough. We want a B or an A in mathematics and in English to get into university. So we should raise the bar. This is not enough. This is simply not enough.
Rachel, as Chris makes clear, we are in a global competition, aren't we, with countries who spare no effort in hothousing their kids to perform in a global market. And we need to be unashamed about higher education, the clue's in the title, being academically elite, because it's not just while you're doing your course. When you go into higher education, you're rubbing shoulders with people from different courses. You want them to be, if you've got to the top of the academic tree and you've gone to a university, you want them to be as smart or smarter than you, to stretch you.
It's an interesting point because it's sort of gets to the heart of the issue about whether we want a limited number of people going into higher education or actually talking about competing with the rest of the world. There are many parts of the world that have far greater numbers of people going into higher education than here. If you look at Canada or Finland or South Korea, much greater levels of participation in higher education. So I think it's whether you want that model to be elite, sort of limited to a certain number of people going into higher education, or, expansion and keeping up with the rest of the world. And I think, of course, we need quality education throughout our schools and our higher education system. I work with higher education institutes. I see, good quality higher education going on, and a whole wide range of higher education that we don't necessarily talk about in terms of different types of courses, technical and vocational education, all of those types of things.
Chris McGovern, I mean, I don't want to boil this down just to whether going to university is value for money, but for a lot of parents, and I speak as a father with children at university, and I'm partly on the hook for it financially, and I'm wary, as many parents are, that sometimes some of the courses don't have the look of value for money.
They don't, and the problem is, and I spoke to a conference of admissions tutors a few years ago with all the senior figures there, and I pointed out to them that a large number of their graduates from universities were underemployed or unemployed. They could see them working in the coffee bar over the road. There was a hushed silence in the room, and it was witnessed by journalists. But after that conference, some university admissions tutors from quite important universities quietly said to me, "Thank God that you said it, because no one else will tell the truth, will they?" Now, that says it all. Look, we want universities, we want lots of youngsters to go to university, but they need to be capable of going to university. So, if a person can't pass maths at level 4, which is a pretty abysmal standard, they shouldn't be at university. We've got to raise the standards in this case and set the bar high, because what we're saying to young people at school is you don't need to work at school because you can walk into university. No, we should be raising the bar in primary schools and in secondary schools. So, these children can go to university. And in some countries they do go because they're very good. You go to Singapore or Shanghai or Estonia or Korea, South Korea, they're at a very high standard. They deserve to go to university because they're good enough. I'd like to play Premiership football. And perhaps, I feel unfairly treated there, but I'm not good enough. And even though I support Aston Villa, I'd like to play for them, and maybe I should get in their team. They're so bad. But
thank
look,
you, Chris.
I'll never
Let's not intrude on private grief anymore. We might come back to that. Rachel, I remember having a conversation 6 or 7 years ago with somebody who was absolutely sure that the end was nigh for large swathes of the university sector. They will be going out of business soon. He said the business model is unsustainable. What do you say to those people who will look at this and say, this is why there's so much criticism, because this seriously undermines the funding model for third-rate institutions which in a Darwinian way, do not deserve to even be there?
I think that really underplays the excellence of our higher education system, and the excellence is partly in the diversity of our higher education system. Lots of the universities, I work with modern universities, and we, train public sector workers. We, operate in degree apprenticeships and the great opportunities that those can bring, as well as the sort of wide range of higher education. And I think we can really limit ourselves to talking about higher education in a really narrow way, which doesn't reflect the full picture of what's out there in terms of universities. And actually, those universities, modern universities, are providing an excellent education for students, but they operate in different ways to other parts of the sector.
Well, Chris, just finally on that point, I mean, what Rachel's describing is what we used to call polytechnics, and more technical and vocational colleges. Now they're called universities. Aren't we in danger of being slightly snobbish?
We are incredibly snobbish in this country. We've got to give more weight to technical vocational training. Charles Dickens or Isambard Kingdom Brunel, they're both incredibly good. By the way, Singapore, which is top of the education pile as far as schooling is concerned, they have a polytechnic in Singapore. A lot of youngsters go there. So, we've got to raise the status of polytechnic and raise the status of vocational courses. And, universities have got a vested interest in pulling in the punters. They're like the educational wide boys at the market. They want to pull them in, and they give them incentive and free gifts and forth to get them in. And then those youngsters, too many of them, not all, there's some great universities, too many are disappointed. What comes first are the students. That's all that matters.
Chris McGovern and Rachel Hewitt will say thanks to both of you for now. Interesting debate. It will carry on, I'm sure. Thanks a lot. Lynn May is alongside me. You probably couldn't hear her, but I could throughout that, making a succession of noises either in approval or against. What did you make of it?
I think they've both got good points, but I think the message is wrong. Just to place the emphasis on maths and English is a very simplistic view of looking at things. There's not, like I said before, one way to success.
For anybody who's just turning on, explain your story, because you you've gone into education at a different angle.
Yeah, again, if you're creative and you're hardworking, there are other routes to going to university. A bit different for me. My mother always wanted me to go into the arts. So I went to the Brit School of Performing Arts and went to uni to study music business and management. And it's not something I wanted to do. However, I had never studied politics. I'd never studied law. I'd never studied the courses that required me to go to university and study what I wanted to. So when I approached my university, I said, I'm going to be honest with you, I don't have a good grade in maths. And they asked me to complete a catalogue of information, why I'm so passionate about the topics that I wanted to study at university, the courses. And I got in through that way. So I think it's very demoralising and demotivating to just see this headline all over the place if you don't get maths and English. But I agreed with what the gentleman was saying, that we do need to raise the bar. Universities, I think we need to remember, they're businesses too. So their aim is to get bums on seats. And there is a massive issue with a lack of employment consultancy with young people at age 16 and towards A-level age, where people are not sitting down with them saying, what do you want to do? Why do you want to go to university? And they're going to uni and studying useless degrees.
Then we're in the business of putting bums on seats, and we're in but we're in competition with other people.
Yeah.
Where's the competition in this sector? If you pay £9,250 for a year's tuition fees for the University of, Colchester, and you pay the same for an Oxford college, where's the competition? If you're paying the same money for a university that's putting on half its lectures this year online, rather than physically in person, face-to-face, contact time, where's the competition?
Yeah.
And I don't blame the universities, but where's the regulator? Where's the government here saying, actually, we're going to create a proper, not wholly free market, but a functioning market rather than this cartel that we've been left with?
Yeah, it does. There definitely needs to be, like you said, the bar needs to be raised in terms of entry requirements, but it should be means tested. It shouldn't be this simplistic view of just maths and English.
Yeah. People younger than you who are making that, on the point of making that decision now, you've seen the worm turning, fewer of them saying university, actually more of them saying, I could do without the debt, I'll get a job.
Yeah, because also, looking at vocational courses, a lot of people go to uni thinking that degree will assist them in the job market, and oftentimes it won't. You can go and study really useful courses that will get you a fantastic job, like Prince 2 and so on and so forth, and these are not being discussed, and I think it needs to be.
Yeah. I want people to still be able to do English degrees and stuff, but I want them to actually really get the most out of it,
But I also think,
being there for the bar.
Yeah, because England is a service-led country, we need to look at useful degrees that will help us with agriculture and help us with manufacturing and things like that.
Yeah, but you need engineers and designers to start making things.
Exactly.